What's up, people, and welcome to another Ace Four Waves episode with me, Annabelle. It's been a while, guys, and I apologize for the bit of the delay in terms of recording and uploading videos. I was actually going to film this episode on Monday, but I was on vacation. It is spring break for most schools and universities in Iowa. So I had a plan to record on Monday. I just got busy. And this is like one of the times now where I have a bit of free time before I go back to school. And this is actually the seventh episode. We're kind of working a bit out of context here and a little bit out of order. I put out like a fifth episode for like a main episode quite a while ago. This is the seventh one. I do have a sixth one. I meant to record my sixth episode last week, but I got busy, with school and the week before spring break, trying to do a lot of homework, a lot of schoolwork. School does come first. I That's like one of the things I have to remember when doing this. I do go to school so I can graduate, get a job after that, all that fun stuff. So school comes first. I just got busy with school and other stuff. But I do have a sixth episode planned. I'm just haven't recorded it yet. I am hoping to record that either tomorrow or like right at the beginning of the week next week. So we're just working a bit out of context here. If you're watching this is my seventh episode, but the sixth episode will be uploaded after this one. I know it might be a bit confusing. Next week, I'm going to try my best to stick to my original schedule that I had planned. But with spring break and school and stuff, we just got a little bit out of order. But that's okay. But I'm back, and it feels so great to be back and to be talking with you guys. I feel like I haven't done one of these in quite a while. I did a coffee talk episode, which I haven't really uploaded yet onto YouTube. I'm hoping to get that uploaded. It is on Spotify if you want to take a listen. It's just me answering some icebreaker questions and you getting to know just a little tiny bit more about me. So if I remember to upload that to this channel, you can watch that there. But on the day of recording this, today's date is March 14th. I was hoping to do this on a Monday before the Big 12 tournament started. We are in Big 12 tournament week. We've had about 2 days worth of this stuff. And on the Thursday, we're starting to get to more of the I want to say more of the, competition. That might be a weird word to phrase this as, but we're done with the regular season of basketball all across the country. Right now, we're just focusing on conference tournaments. There are a few conference tournaments happening this week. I know the SEC tournament is occurring. We have the Big 12 tournament. I don't know if the Big 10 tournament is happening this week too or not. There was the women's Big 12 championship a couple days ago. I know last week there were a few more conference tournaments, but the regular season is done. And I thought that this episode today, we could talk a little bit about the regular season and kind of do some recapping here. I want to point out first, though, that since this is Big 12 tournament week, I don't know who's going to come away as Big 12 champions. It could seriously be anyone's game. I know there are a few teams that have been already eliminated, but for the sake of me meaning to record this on Monday, I was just going to say that I think all 14 teams have a solid chance. I know that's not really the case anymore, but every team was legitimate contenders, and I firmly believe that when you have to play in one of the hardest conferences in America. So just expect the unexpected at this point, because I seriously think it could come down to 5 teams who would rightfully deserve to win the championship. But back in episode 3, If you guys watch that, it is on YouTube. I did a tier ranking of Big 12 basketball where I just gave some rankings on all 14 teams based on the season so far. I believe that was the second week in February, so almost a month ago. But we were kind of at the mid-season point, you know? We had a month of basketball from January up to that point. We had some really great wins for some of these teams. We also saw some bad losses, if I can say that. But now that the regular season is done, all games in the regular season have been finished, we're going to do a final tier ranking, which is what I said back in the third episode. Once the regular season ended, I wanted to do a final tier ranking where I rank all the teams based on their conference record. So I have not gone back to see what my mid-season ranking looked like, but I'm going to assume that's going to be a little bit different from this final ranking, but we'll have a look after I'm done recording and I upload this. I'll go back and take a look. But I feel like it's not going to differ very much, aside from maybe just a few teams. Some teams might get promoted to higher tiers, some teams may get demoted to lower tiers. So, like always, I'm going to try to remain as unbiased as possible, even though I am an Iowa State Cyclones fan. I have notes with me here that I took based on each team individually, and well, you to give my take on where these teams rank. And we'll just be looking at conference record. We're not going to be looking at overall record, even though I guess overall record does matter for NCAA tournaments and the March Madness. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to be looking at conference record only and nothing else. To be honest, I already mentioned this. I have no idea where I ranked each team first, so we'll just take a look after this episode. But again, I don't think things will change much, but I could be wrong. And we'll just compare and contrast these rankings. My tier categories are going to be the same as always. We have teams of the conference for the best of the best. We have gritty, ballers, okay, and need some work, which is my lowest tier. I was about to say, if you're listening on Spotify, you can hear me rank my teams, but I'm not doing this on Spotify. I don't have my phone on me, so this is just going to be a YouTube video, which I feel like might be easier for you guys, so you can actually see my tier list and how I'm ranking each of these teams. I call this episode winners and in parentheses, mostly, and in parentheses, losers. It sounds harsh, but it's winners and mostly losers. Because we had some winners up at the top of the conference standings, and then the rest were just not up on top. So I guess we kind of have to call them losers, even though it might be harsh. But for one fun fact first, before we dive in, all 14 teams in the Big 12 have at least one ranked win this season. So in conference play. So every team has beaten a ranked team at least once. I don't know if any other conference can say that for all of their teams, which just makes the Big 12 one of the best conferences in America right now. How factually correct is that? I don't know. But I was going to consider making just a separate tier for Kansas, but that seems harsh and mean, and they aren't really terribly that bad, even though, as y'all just talked about that when we get started here. So we're going to share a screen here, get my notes ready, and share screen. You can, I have to go here. You can actually see some of my teams on there. We don't need that. I was reading a book. Hold on, I don't even know how you do this. There we go. Big 12 tier ranking. I had started this I had started this a couple days ago, actually. I was going to record on vacation, so I did have some of this episode already recorded, but there was people coming in and out. So while as I was trying to film this, so I just went ahead and put all of my teams in the rankings because I didn't know if I was just going to use my previous content to upload or if I wanted to go and redo this. So I have all teams on the tier already just from where I started and finished. But we can still go over. I can still give you guys my opinion on where I ranked each team individually. And I guess the best way to do this is just to start from the bottom and go up on top. So let's start with Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was 4-13 in conference play, which is actually not true because I wrote up this content last week so I could use it for this week. I I want to say they lost the rest of their 2 games that they had. So we'll just say they were 4-15 in conference play. They had one ranked win against BYU, and have beaten teams like West Virginia, Cincinnati, and Kansas State. They lost to teams such as Iowa State, Kansas, Texas Tech, and Baylor, and they will miss out on the NIT tournament with a 12-20 overall record, but they'll just need a rebounding year next year. I want to say that Oklahoma State finished second to last. I do think they finished second to last in the Big 12. So when you finish second to last, that kind of makes you automatically go in the need some work category. I know that this season was Oklahoma State trying to figure out their identity, kind of rebuilding from last season. I know they weren't the best team last year as well, but I have full faith that they will get back kind of to the middle of the pack at some point. I just think that they need to work on some stuff. Obviously, they need to work on figuring out who their main guards are, their main point guards, passing the ball a little bit more, getting the rebounds, defense, all of the mechanics of college basketball that you learn in high school, middle school, and then AAU ball. But Oklahoma State's not a terrible team. Again, they did finish with like a 12-20 overall record, so not the best. There is one team who was statistically worse than them, but if you can, we just need this team kind of to figure out, their identity and their culture in the basketball program and work from there. But I have firm faith that we'll see this Oklahoma State team in the years coming kind of move back up towards the middle of the pack. West Virginia, however, was 4-14 in conference play. Not good for them, especially considering that they have been on top of the conference and lingering towards the middle of the pack of the conference for quite a few years. They have wins over ranked teams such as Kansas and Texas. They lost to Iowa State, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State only by single digits. The rest of their losses were by double digits. They do have an interim head coach at the moment, but they will need a rebounding year next year as well. I want to say that they were the ones who finished last place in the conference. I know I wasn't going to talk about overall record, but they did only have 9 wins throughout the whole season. They are the only team who did not get to double-digit wins. So that also puts you in the need some work category. Again, I know that they do have an interim coach. I know that some players from their team transferred. They brought in some new players too, but the same thing as Oklahoma State. They need to work on figuring out their identity. I know you can't really put a lot of the blame for how their season turned out on an interim head coach, especially when their former head coach has been known for many, many years and has worked with this program to develop them into the basketball team that we all kind of knew. But I have, just like with them, I have full faith that West Virginia will figure out their identity in basketball. If they do keep their interim head coach, I believe that he will learn from this season, hopefully bring in some more transfers and just work with them individually to develop them into good players and just teach them kind of how Big 12 basketball works. UCF, moving on. So those are my two teams who finished in the need some work category. And I want to say that they were in this tier. I had the same tier ranking for them when I did this the first time. But moving on to UCF, UCF was 6-10 in conference play. Again, I know that's wrong. I want to say that they finished either 5-11 or 6-12. They have wins over ranked teams like Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech. They lost to teams such as Iowa State, BYU, West Virginia, Houston, and Baylor. They weren't the best team in the conference, but it was a good test for them. They are one of 4 teams who came to the Big 12 this year. And for their first year in the conference, I think that they did okay. Hence why they are in my okay tier. They beat some good teams. They beat Kansas, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Texas Tech, though they were all ranked at the time. They did lose, however, to West Virginia, one of the lower teams in the Big 12, but they also lost to good teams like Iowa State, BYU, Houston, and Baylor. Those are like 4 of the teams on top. So it was a good test for UCF. I know UCF for a first time team, it probably wasn't what they were kind of expecting to be thrown into, but they are a good basketball team. They kept up with Iowa State pretty well when I watched the game. It took Iowa State a couple minutes to kind of figure out where the game was headed, get back on track, but they did come out with the win. They kept up with Texas Tech and BYU. BYU is a really hard team to beat at home and kind of on the road too, which we'll dive into later. But UCF gets my okay tier. I would like to think that UCF will only get better on from here now that they have a full season under their belt. And the Big 12 is bringing in 4 more teams next year. So we're going to continue to grow and expand. But like I said, this was a good test for them. And I think that they did okay. Moving on to Cincinnati. Cincinnati was 6-11 in conference play. I want to say they did win. I think they might have been 7-12 or 7-11. They have wins over ranked teams such as Texas Tech, BYU, and TCU. They lost to West Virginia, Houston, Iowa State, Baylor, and Texas. Just a couple of examples. They had, I guess I wrote, they did finish with a 17-13 overall record. I think they finished 8-14 overall and might be fighting for a spot in the bid tournament. They will need to pick up some good wins in the conference tournament to grab the committee's attention. Cincinnati, for me, just like UCF, they were close in the final conference standings, so they get my okay tier as well. They are another first-time team, just like UCF, and I think that they also did well considering the fact that they were kind of thrown into this conference and playing against some really, really great basketball teams. Cincinnati is hard to beat at home. I know that they did lose a few games at home. They also lost quite a few on the road, but picking up a road win at Cincinnati is tough and almost impossible, which should tell you a lot about Cincinnati's fans and their home court advantage. Cincinnati, again, I've seen the way that they play. They are great at offense. They are great at defense. They just need to figure out a consistency and staying consistent between the two. Sometimes we see Cincinnati go on really hot streaks of just shots falling down one by one by one. and then then they might go on a bit of a cold streak, and their defense will kind of slip away. One thing I would really like to see from Cincinnati next season is finding that consistency between offense. If you're not, if the shots are not falling for you right away, picking up the rebounds on defense, staying, focused, staying hard on defense, picking up those points and forcing your opponents to take shots that they might not feel comfortable with. That is something I would like to see. If they can do that, I do believe that they might be a little bit more consistent and not, all over the place with their wins and their losses and stuff. But they give my final okay tier ranking. They are okay. Any other situation, I might have considered putting them into the ballers tier, but there are a few other teams that I believe deserve that over them. Kansas State. Kansas State finished 8-10 in conference play, or 8-11, if my math is wrong. They have wins over ranked teams such as Kansas, Baylor, BYU, and Iowa State. They had a 4-game losing streak at one point to teams such as Iowa State, Houston, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. They had another period of a 3-game losing streak after beating Kansas. Kansas State, I guess they had an 18-14 overall record. And I know that they are one of the teams who are the first 4 out. Kansas State gets my okay tier ranking, and my reasoning for that is I have never seen any other team aside from maybe West Virginia go on a 4-game losing streak, be a good Kansas team at the time, and then go on a 3-game losing streak. Kansas State is arguably one of the more inconsistent teams in the conference. You just can't go on a 4-game losing streak and then win one game and then go right back down to a 3-game losing streak. I know that they did pick up a few good wins. They did beat Baylor, BYU. They did win their regular season finale against Iowa State, but when you're just inconsistent like that, that makes you go into my okay tier. I can't call them really ballers for the way that they rebounded after their losing streaks, but Kansas State will be fighting for a final spot into the NCAA tournament, much like Cincinnati. They will need to pick up some really great wins in the tournament right now to have a chance at being talked about for the committee. But for the regular season, Kansas State is an okay team. I think that they will get better. I think we will see some improvement, but they are just going to have to be more consistent. They can't just be going on losing streaks, win one game, back to their losing streaks, especially if they are in 4 and 3 game losing spurts. Oklahoma, let's see. Oklahoma finished 9-10 in conference play. They have only one ranked win, and that was against BYU. They lost to Iowa State, Houston, Kansas, Baylor, and UCF. They did beat Iowa State, though, their first conference game of the season, but that was back when Iowa State wasn't ranked. So, although I say that they did lose to Iowa State when they were ranked, they did beat Iowa State when they were an unranked team at the time, if that makes any sense. At the time of writing, I said they are at a 20-12 overall record. I do believe one win away from securing a spot in the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma let a few of their losses get away from them, but the team is producing great offense for their coach, Porter Moser. I was watching the Big 12 tournament, and I do know that Oklahoma lost in their round. So they will finish off with 20 wins. Will it be enough to get them a spot into the NCAA tournament? I think so. But again, they finished in the middle of the pack of the conference, so not bad. I know they weren't up at the top. I alluded to the fact that Oklahoma let a few of their games get away from them when they lost to Iowa State. I do believe that they scored their fewest points in a conference game all season. It wasn't a great night offensively. I do believe that they had a shot to go and beat Iowa State on the road, but then the next game against Houston, they kept up with them pretty good. Their shots were falling, their threes were falling. They were playing fantastic defense, but Houston just made a jumper to basically conceal the win right as the time was expiring. So they only lost to Houston by 2, which was which is an upgrade from the fact that they lost to in double digits to Iowa State, and Houston was better than Iowa State at the time. But Oklahoma are ballers. They are, again, a very good team. I think Porter Moser has done a really great job with this program and developing his players. When we do see them in the NCAA tournament, I do believe that we will see a better form of them. I don't think that they will let their last few losses in the regular season come back to haunt them. They did suffer a pretty big blow to Texas in their regular season finale. I know losing in the first round to the Big 12 tournament wasn't really ideal either, but they are ballers right in the middle of my tiers. They're not Keens, they're not, I can't really call them a great team, but they're above okay, and they definitely don't need some work. The Texas Longhorns. Texas was 9-9 in conference play. They have ranked wins over Baylor, Oklahoma, and TCU. They lost to Iowa State, Houston, Kansas, West Virginia, and UCF. This wasn't their best year, and they will be going to the SEC next year, just like Oklahoma. So Oklahoma and Texas are leaving for the SEC next season. We're going to be losing 2 teams, but we're going to be bringing in 4 new teams. So realistically, we are just gaining 2. I know we're gaining 4 new teams, but we're just going to be adding out of the 14, we're going to be jumping up to 16, if that makes sense. Since we're losing 2, we'll bring 2 in. That'll bring 14 plus the other 2, 16, if my math is correct. I'm not great at math, so if that math is incorrect, feel free to call me out for that, because that is kind of really bad. Texas, however, Texas is a team that I saw, much like Kansas State, who was very inconsistent. They had a hard time winning at home. I would argue that they did better on the road than they were at home. So for the sake of the Big 12 tournament, I hope that being away from their home court would give them a little bit of an advantage. That might sound like reverse psychology, but Texas, I think, just went through a roller coaster of a season 2, beating teams and then losing, then winning again, then losing again. It was pretty much of a roller coaster. I want to say that they got to 21 wins, I believe, by the end of conference play, or maybe they finished at 20 exactly. But the Oklahoma game in their finale was a must win for them. They pulled it off. Kudos to them for that. But they are ballers. They finished around the same realm as Oklahoma, but at the end of the regular season. But again, they are the middle of the pack. I can't put them at the top. I can't really put them at the bottom either. And we'll see how both of these teams fare in the SEC next season. Moving on, the Kansas Jayhawks, the team that had considered just making just a separate tier for them, which should really tell you something. Kansas was 10 and they were either 10-8 or 11-7 in conference play. I think they were 10-8 in conference play. They have wins over ranked teams such as Baylor, Oklahoma, and Houston. They lost to Iowa State, Kansas, UCF, Baylor, Texas Tech, and Houston. This is the worst that Kansas has looked in a long time in conference play, but they'll seek out vengeance in the NCAA tournament and the Big 12 tournament as well. If we're talking about inconsistent teams, I think we have to plug Kansas right in the middle of that as well. And my example for this is Kansas is a team that beat Houston their first time in Allen Fieldhouse, I do believe. Kansas lost to Iowa State when they were both ranked. So if we can consider that a good loss. They lost to, however, Kansas State, who was not ranked, UCF, who was also not ranked, and I want to say that Baylor and Texas Tech were ranked at the times too. Kansas's regular season finale is something that we absolutely have to talk about in these rankings. Houston is one of the best teams in the conference and in the country. I don't think that we can deny that. They are ranked number one for a reason. They looked really strong in conference play. They beat really good teams and they beat them by quite a bit of a margin. Kansas is a great team. I'm not saying that they are a bad team at all. They are a great team, but I have not seen a good team like Kansas go and play a great team like Houston and lose by 30 points. Kansas's regular season finale resulted in a blowout loss to Houston by 30 points. Texas Tech did not lose to that team by 30. Baylor didn't lose to that team by 30. Iowa State did not lose to that team by 30. Even some of these other teams did not lose to the number one team by 30 points. That we could say that that was probably one of the worst Big 12 games this season between Houston and Kansas. And when you lose by 30 points and you lose to teams who are in the OK tier, that leaves you into the ballers category. I know that they finished top 5 in the conference. I know that some people say you should put them in the gritty tier if they finished, 4th or 5th place. But I can't put a team who lost by 30 points into the gritty category. I can't put a team who lost to UCF and Kansas State and lost 8 games in the conference and again went through a bit of inconsistency at times. I'm looking for the teams who were staying almost consistent throughout the season. I'm looking for the teams who came out with some good wins, some losses, but also kept their games pretty close. Losing by 30 does not qualify you for teams of the conference or into the gritty. So that's my stance on that. Again, Kansas is a good basketball team, but how they'll do in the NCAA tournament when they couldn't win, they had trouble winning at home and on the road. I want to say that they have one of the worst road records out of all the teams. There might have been 2 or 3 other teams who had worse road records than Kansas. So we'll have to see how Kansas does with that. But for the regular season, they finished as ballers. TCU. TCU was 9-9 in conference play. They had wins over ranked teams such as Baylor, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Houston. They lost to Iowa State, Cincinnati, Baylor, and BYU. This is a team who finished in the middle of the pack in the conference and is still a good team nonetheless. So TCU finished, I believe, below Kansas only by 1. So again, that puts them into the gritty category. TCU did lose some home games. They lost on the road as well. They lost to Iowa State twice. And the first time they lost to Iowa State on their home court, Iowa State was without one of their best players. So I think that should have given TCU an advantage when Iowa State is without their best player to go and attack that weakness. They couldn't do that, unfortunately. But like I said, this is still a good basketball team. I don't know how they're doing in the tournament conference tournament right now. I'll have to take a look at that, but they are ballers. I think Jamie Dixon is doing a great job with his team, getting them to really attack opponents' weaknesses. They are one of the better teams in the entire nation when it comes to fast break points. So that's something to look out for in the NCAA tournament when they're playing teams outside of their own conference. But TCU gets my final ballers spot in my tier list. And we have the 4 baller teams. Moving up to the gritty category, which is what I like to call the A tier. Baylor. Baylor finished, I think 12-6 in conference play. They actually 11-7 in conference play. They have wins over ranked teams such as BYU, Iowa State, Kansas, and Oklahoma. They lost to Texas, TCU, BYU, Houston, Kansas, and Kansas State. Towards the end of the season, Baylor was peaking at the right time, and they are a contender to win the tournament. And I still believe that. Baylor finished 3rd place, either 3rd or tied for 3rd in the Big 12 this season. They were at the top, towards the top 5. They give my gritty ranking. Baylor beat Iowa State at their home court. They beat who did I say? They also beat BYU, who was ranked, Kansas and Oklahoma, who were both ranked at the time. Baylor is a good contender and a strong contender to win the Big 12 tournament, and rightfully so. They have all the right stuff on offense to make them click and to make them score and make their offense work the way that they want to. They also know how to play defense, and they know how to kind of guard and protect the perimeter and inside the perimeter as well. This is a team who will fight till the very end, from what I saw in the regular season. And I know that they are going to give us some of their best that we have seen from them. Texas Tech. Texas Tech was 11-7 in conference play, I believe. They have wins over ranked teams such as Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas. I want to say that they did beat Baylor in the regular season finale, but that might be incorrect, so someone would have to fact check me on that. They lost to Iowa State, Houston, TCU, Cincinnati, and UCF. Texas Tech went through a mountain of a season, but will need to come with a lot of fight of grit down in Kansas City. I have no idea how Texas Tech is doing in the Big 12 tournament as well. I would need to check that out. But much for the regular season, they are gritty. They beat really good teams. They lost to really good teams. They lost to some teams who were kind of at the bottom of the conference. But Texas Tech, when they're on, they're on, you know? This is a team that I saw who, much like Baylor, has all the right stuff to make them click. They know who they are on offense. They know who they are on defense. I think that they need to find that balance and find, that gray middle between them. So if you can be really good on offense, but if you're not really good on defense, that kind of picks you apart. And that goes for any basketball team. Some teams have the right weapons and the right production on offense, but the defense is kind of a very far ground from that. And some teams have like everything that clicks into place on defense. It's just that they struggle to score on the offensive side. And some teams have both. Texas Tech is a team that does have both, but it can go a bit left and right at times. So they are better though, I think, than Oklahoma and Texas. I think that they are a better team than Kansas and TCU, unfortunately, in my opinion. So I have to put them above those teams. And they pretty much stayed neck and neck with Baylor throughout most of the season. So they are a gritty team. BYU. BYU, much like UCF and Cincinnati, is a first time team in the Big 12, and they did really well. They finished 10 and 8 in conference play, I believe. They have wins over ranked teams such as Iowa State, Baylor, and Kansas. They lost to Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and Houston. BYU did surprisingly well in the Big 12 as first timers and showed that they had the will to win. This team is slept on, but when they are on, don't be surprised if they make a run at the most unexpected time. I have to say, out of all 14 teams in the conference, I was really, really, really impressed with BYU. They beat some very good teams. They also lost, though, to Oklahoma State, as who we all know is not really that good. But they also lost to Houston, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma, teams who finished either at the top or in the middle of the conference. BYU is known for their 3-point shooting. I think that's one of their keys to making the offense go off at the right time. If they can shoot the three and if the three can fall down for them. We did see a bit of that against Iowa State for BYU on the road, where they kind of got off to a cold shooting, and then the three started falling down, but the cold shooting kind of happened again. If you're for opponents, if you're looking to stop BYU and having a chance at beating BYU, you have to force them to shoot the three. I know that they shoot the three well, but sometimes the shots won't always go down for them. And I don't know if they are really comfortable with shooting inside of the paint, even though I know that they are capable of doing that. They can also play really great defense, much like Texas Tech and Baylor can. But I would say BYU is the sleeper team, and they're the sleeper team for a reason. If you leave guys open and unguarded, chances are they are about 99% sure, 99% locked to shoot that shot and make that shot. So never leave a BYU player unguarded. Never start off, on a cold shooting. That's something I have seen teams do against BYU, and that is a strong reason why BYU has been able to come out with wins, because teams cannot seem to find their scoring and their shooting, consistency and their shooting and scoring pace right away. Then BYU comes out with a double-digit lead, and all of a sudden the other opposing teams are looking to play catch up. So you want to be able to score fast and try to score first when you're playing BYU. But they are a gritty team. They are a team, again, who showed that they could keep up in the Big 12 as first timers. And I don't think we're going to see the last of them anytime soon, and especially in years to come. So those are my 3 gritty teams: Baylor, Texas Tech, and BYU for my final ranking. Now, there are 2 teams remaining, and those are the 2 teams who are kings of the conference. And we're going to start with the number 1 team in the country right now, Houston. Houston is finished with a 15-3 record in conference play. They have wins over ranked teams such as Iowa State, Baylor, BYU, and Texas Tech. They did not lose a single home game this season, and they will look to make a run into the Big 12 tournament. They are the outright winner of the regular season title, which means that because they finished first, they are regular season champions. Their only losses have come to Iowa State, TCU, and Kansas. Obviously, when you finish at first place in the Big 12, and when you're the number 1 team in the entire nation, you have to be kings of the conference. I know that there was some doubt for Houston coming into this season, saying, oh, will they be able to keep up with Big 12 basketball? will they be able to, pull off wins against harder teams? And they did. They only lost 3 conference games, and those were to Iowa State, TCU, and Kansas, 3 really good teams. They protected their home court. I know that this team is a really good scoring team. I know that they have some really, really great players on their team. Jamal Schned is an outstanding basketball player. I know that he did win Big 12 Player of the Year and Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, I believe, rightfully so. Kelvin Sampson won Big 12 Coach of the Year, and he deserves that for getting Houston to #1 in the Big 12, #1 in the country, and as first timers, just makes their run and their season overall impressive and impeccable. So props to Houston for that. They are favored. They are favored to win the Big 12 title as well. We'll see them in the NCAA tournament. They should lock up a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So we'll just see who they play, and they will be able to make a run in that tournament. I know that people are already considering them as a Final Four team. We'll see if that's true or not. But Houston, congratulations on a wonderful season. And for your first time in the Big 12 conference, give you your flowers and your roses because it is really impressive. And this is a team who is just really, really good overall. And finally, my last team. I need bits of my prop for this. I got these. You can't see it, but it says Juicy Wiggle on here. And that is for the Iowa State Cyclones. I'll show you my glasses here. It seriously just says get juicy in Iowa State there. I'm gonna wear that when I share my stat with you, and then I'm gonna take these off. Iowa State finished 13-5 in conference play, solo second place. They have wins over ranked teams like Houston, Kansas, and TCU. They have also not lost a single home game this season. And one of Iowa State's stances, both in football and basketball, that they like to do is the Juicy Wiggle. Hence why I have my Juicy Wiggle sunglasses on at the moment, just so we can get juicy. They lost to Oklahoma, BYU, Baylor, and Houston, all ranked teams at the time. Their first loss against a non-ranked team came to Kansas State in their regular season finale, but they pretty much had nothing to lose at that point, even though they would have liked to see a win there. I said they finished second place into the Big 12. This is a team that has taken the league by notice. I don't know if they really took the nation by notice, but they will look to make a deep run in Kansas City in the Big Dance. The Big 12 tournament is dubbed as Hilton South for the amount of Iowa State fans who show up to support their team, and it's only about a 4 or 5 hour drive from Ames to Kansas City. Iowa State finished in second place. They are also kings of the conference for not losing a single home game this season. All of their losses have come on the road, just like Houston. But I will say, I was really, really impressed with BYU. I think a lot of people were impressed with Iowa State. This is a team who was predicted to finish kind of in the middle of the Big 12, maybe a little bit lower as well. I know that this was considered a rebounding year for Iowa State, losing some good players, losing to players from graduation to the transfer portal. They brought in some new guys. They brought in Keyshawn Gilbert, who is a great player. They brought in some new freshmen. Milan Momcilovic is a really great basketball player, and for a freshman who is 6'9", can really shoot the ball and shoot it from the deep land. They brought in Curtis Jones, who is, again, took me by surprise. I think that he reached his peak towards the middle of the season and towards the end of the season, regular season as well. Taman Lipsey, the sophomore from Ames, outstanding basketball player. He is a great defensive player. He struggles with offense at times, but that's also who Iowa State is. Iowa State has made their identity known for their defense, and that's where we have to give a lot of credit to TJ Otzelberger. In the past, I don't think we could really say that Iowa State was great a great team defensively. They were a good team defensively, make no mistake about that. But this year, we really saw the defense come to light. We saw them playing man to man defense. We saw them playing zone defense. We saw them playing, outside guarding the perimeter better. We saw them sticking with their guys and forcing their opponents to take the shots that they might not normally take. This was one of Iowa State's best years defensively, and they also forced the second most turnovers in the entire country. So when you force about 17 turnovers per game and they lead to easy points, you come out with wins like that. They do struggle with finding a bit of a flow offensively. I did notice that that was kind of a trend towards the last 4 games of the season where they just couldn't start off hot. They kind of had to come from behind and build their lead up. But again, they can shoot from three. They have multiple players who can hit the three. They can shoot inside the paint. Free throws are another story. I kind of alluded to that in a separate video that I made that you can find on the channel as well. But Houston and Iowa State are my outright two teams who belong in the Kings of the Conference tier. And those are all 14 teams. I'm going to take these off now that I'm done talking about Iowa State. Those the Get Juicy sunglasses too, I really like them. And you can kind of see out of them too. So it's not just covered by this. You have like the black as well, so I can see. But I really like them. And they're good for things like this. So, conclusion time. This is my final ranking of Big 12 basketball this year. You'll probably disagree with me on some of these rankings or all of these rankings, but that was just my take and my view, my opinion. Some teams surprised us. Some teams disappointed us, but the Big 12 is still one of the best conferences in the nation, which we all knew by now, or we semi-knew and kind of know. I am looking forward to watching the Big 12 tournament. I know I've already watched a couple of games. I've been impressed. I'm really liking what I am seeing. And we will know who is all in the NCAA tournament in just 3 days. Sunday is only 3 days away. I think I will do a Saturday special, which will be a preview of Selection Sunday. I don't know if I'm going to do that now that I have to play catch up with some of my episodes and content, but that might be a video. So you just look out for that. I do have some other topics that I'll be diving into kind of next week. Obviously, now through the beginning of April, we'll be talking a little bit about March Madness. I do have content and episodes planned for that. We might be doing a Saturday special, just doing a check-in of where all the teams are at and how it's looking so far. April is the start of the 4 majors in golf. So the Masters is going to be coming up in just under a month or so. I'll do some stuff about that. I'm going to be starting a new segment on the podcast, so you can look out for that pretty soon. I believe that's going to happen in about 2 weeks or so. And then we're almost to the spring. We have March stuff too. Did through all the March content, did through some April content. I think that you guys will like what I have planned for April. I'm already gonna start thinking about what I want to do for May. But then with 2 months till May, and then it's summer. So summer is just almost 3 or 4 months away, which is literally insane. Feels like this year's already 2024 is already moving by so fast. I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I know this is probably one of the longer ones that I have done. I try to stick to, 30, 40 minutes, 50 minutes if it's needed. I have a feeling that this exceeded over an hour. So if you guys don't really like listening to someone talk for an hour, I don't blame you. We will be getting more towards some shorter stuff, or I'll try to film, videos that won't take an hour long. This is just me talking about my tier rankings and my tier list and giving some of my opinions and takes on that. But for now, thank you for listening to the Ace for Waves podcast. You can check out previous content on the YouTube channel. Check it out on Spotify. Again, this is the 7th episode. I still need to record my 6th episode, so you can look out for that really soon. But other than that, I will see you guys on the next episode.